And welcome to this regular meeting of the South Central Regional Transit District. It is 1:39 p.m.
She's calling in.
That works. This session is now, in order, yes. Oh, my goodness. All right. At 1:39, that's correct. All right, if you can please rise for the pledge. Councilor Flores, you can lead us, please. Can lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we can have the roll call, please.
Yes, Javier Perea,
Present?
Russell Hernandez,
Present.
Meiji Powie. Yvonne Flores,
Present.
Manuel Sanchez, Diana Murillo, Robert Martinez. Doesn't look like we have a quorum, Mr. Perea.
Excuse me, this is Kathy Lunenberg, and I'm the alternate for Meiji.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. My apologies, Kathy. That's my fault for not knowing that. So we do have a quorum. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. We do have a quorum here. We're going to move on to the rest of the agenda here. Approval of the agenda minutes for January 24th, 2024. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the minutes.
I have a motion on the floor made by Mayor Hernandez. I want to say Russell, but it's like.
You can, Mayor, I have a comment. Still the same.
Let me get it. Is there a second on this item? Is there a second? Oh, any second?
Kathy?
Sure, I'll second it.
Sure, all right. You have a comment?
Yes, we have, as a standard, we put closed session on the agenda, but we don't necessarily have to go into closed session. So I don't know if you want to withdraw that from the agenda.
Well, you know,
Change.
I don't have an item for approval of the agenda order, but we can, with no agenda order approval, then we can just skip over it.
That's fine. Okay, thank you.
All right, is there any discussion on the minutes? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All opposed say nay. Abstentions. I have one abstention, Councilor Flores. Motion carries. The minutes have been approved. All right, there's a public input. Do you have any public input today? All right, seeing and hearing none. Executive Director's report.
Yes, I'm just going to do a brief verbal presentation this time. So we're now well into the month of February. I did a rough projection this morning of ridership through the first 3 weeks. So it looks like we're right on track for about 9,000 rides for the month, which year over year is about 1,000 rides more than we did at this time last year. So that's a very good number, even though it was very slow at the beginning of the month. And it's been a very challenging month, both the weather being cold and warm and windy and so on. So we've done pretty well that ridership is holding pretty well. So I think we'll have a good month when we wrap up this week. And I think the only other thing I was going to say is that we're continuing to work on a number of projects. I'll have more to report next month. We are submitting a grant application called RAISE, much more difficult and challenging than I anticipated, but the last time we submitted a major grant application was in June of 2022, and that's when we submitted the grants for the 5339, in which we were awarded 2 grants for $5.5 million, and that's where the money is coming to get us the electric buses and a facility. And then later in 2022, we also got 3 grants approved on the CMAQ, and that was about another $5 million for electric vehicles and so on. So we've done very well with our grants. So there's the first one in over almost 2 years that we've submitted. So we'll see how this goes. It was a lot more difficult than I anticipated with the work that we had to do. I appreciated the mayors of Anthony and Sunland Park came in with letters of support. I regret we weren't able to get information in time to the other members, but it seemed like that was the best we could do. We just need to have something to check it off the list. So it doesn't seem to matter how many more that you have, but it's good to have those letters. In the future, we'll make sure we get those done in advance.
Sure, Councilor Flores.
Your mic's off.
How ignorant I am. Seriously, how many, what was the total of those grants? And they're specific to certain uses, correct? Allocations.
That's correct. So the first two grants were what we call this Section 5339. They're bus and facilities grants. Those are very competitive. We did very well to get the funding in the first grant because we're up against everybody in the nation. The second grant, we were up against everybody in the rural category. So that worked out very well for us for both. This grant, the RAISE grant, is one that follows what used to be called the Tiger grants. They're specifically made to fund highways and cities and roads and a lot of urban development, but they do include provisions for public transit. So one of the challenges for the grant, and we're lucky, and we're going to introduce him here in a minute, I guess. We have a new planning staff members, Tim McDaniel, and Tim has been very helpful to me in getting the cost calculation of the benefits and some of the other elements of the grant. That was something that we had used and got some technical support previously from either our contractors or from the Messiah Valley MPO with Michael McAdams before he left. So Tim has really stepped in quickly. He's only been with us for maybe his third week, but he's been able to help out. The other aspect of the grant is that there's no one else in the state of New Mexico applying for these grant funds, which worries me. That's a separate discussion. Maybe we'll come into our, you are?
Yeah.
For RAISE?
Yeah.
Oh, for public transit.
Oh, for public transit.
So the 23 rural and 5 urban operators, the 28 operators, none of them will be submitting it. And the reason, quite frankly, is this grant was very technically required. If I had had more time, I think we could have done a better job, but I think we're going to do a good job. I think we're in the B- category right now, so I hope by the end of the day we'll move it up to B+. So our numbers keep getting better as we go. But the simple answer, and I talked to the state of New Mexico staff earlier in the week, because I was thinking maybe we defer this one. But they encouraged us because we're the only ones, and because it is rural, that gives us a chance to get those funds. And again, it's an opportunity for more electric vehicles, some property and other elements of the project. And we think this is going to be beneficial to Las Cruces and the surrounding area.
Was there any reason why the other rural community, not the other rural, we're not rural, the rural communities did not apply for it?
Yes, and it's actually on our agenda. One of the issues, we'll get into the budget, is local match. A lot of the agencies and cities are just real difficult. And I know the cities are all as dependent as we are on getting money at this time from the state legislature. So that makes up the lion's share of our local match. We're able to utilize our memorandum of agreement with the county funds to typically pay for our operating budget as opposed to the capital. So as long as the state can keep kicking the money in every year and we're able to meet those grant obligations, then we're good. In our case, it's actually worked out in our best interest that the grants have been slow, and we'll talk about that again today as well, because that gives us more time to come up with local match. I don't know what that means for the state of New Mexico, and one of the bills that we were after was to look for money that would help the state transit agencies with local funding for local match. I don't think that's going to happen this go around. I know the bill that we had, 142, which I shared with the board a few weeks ago, didn't make it up to even being considered. There are a couple other elements, and we've had some discussions with the Secretary of Transportation. That information will be forthcoming in the days ahead, whether or not there might be a small partial money. But the bottom line is that takes us down the road to other discussions about revenues.
I think, oh no, I know. My concern is that it really there's a breakdown of communication, transportation, because of transportation between all of the communities within New Mexico. And I hope the Secretary of State or whoever allocates monies somehow advertises enough and actually seeks applications. And you said they're kind of cumbersome. And so if they were, and very demanding, and if they were just more, what's the word, applicant,
User-friendly?
excuse me, I'm sorry, user-friendly. Thank you for reading my mind, Javier. You're really talented. Yeah, I just think about how fragmented we are as a state, and the rural communities being, left out in the cold. So, but thank you for your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The last comment I'll make is the upside to this is that the U.S. government looks to be releasing the next grant application for NOLO grants, the same ones we were awarded 2 years ago, sometime in April. And so if that goes well, all the work we just did, we can use this for that grant application. So it's not like the work is going to waste. So we'll just try to get it up to an A class by the time we resubmit. So it's been a good experience. So also, every time you do these kind of things and you have to go do the late night homework and effort, you start to realize that some of the things that we're not taking advantage of and sometimes not even taking credit for. So there's a lot of things that we can show when we're submitting this to the national effort. And one of the big things that did come out of that is that they do look at our reputation, Adam. How well are we doing with our folks with FTA and others? So that one kind of worries me because we use a lot of data in there that is based on analysis, but then I kept reading throughout the grant application, 42 pages worth, all this stuff that sounds to me to be not to be. It's a little more subjective. So I don't think an opinion from an FTA office is where you want to end up on something like this. So I did surround us with the city of Las Cruces, the cities on our membership, and the county, because to me, those are the ones that we want to support to make the argument of how well we're doing. And the state of New Mexico, they're very helpful. Thank you. That's the end of my report.
All right, any other questions? All right, seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to item number 7. A resolution approving the BMO loan agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a request to seek funding as far as a commercial loan or a commercial line of credit, specifically because we are slow in receiving payment on a good portion of our grants, specifically from the FTA. And we do have outstanding bills that need to be paid. And the hope is to receive permission to seek funding for about $60,000. The only reason I say seek funding is because in my attempt to discuss this and renew our commercial line of credit with the BMO, formerly known as Bank of the West, they have completely new requirements now. And some of those requirements, I am still researching to determine how we, as a special district in the state of New Mexico, can provide the information that they are seeking, specifically because they are seeking tax returns. Like I said, what I'm doing is I am seeking out alternate forms of funding. One of those items is the New Mexico Finance Authority that I'm researching to see if at all possible that we can gain a equipment project fund, which is a line of credit for us to be able to use and purchase capital items and in return reimburse or pay those items back to the New Mexico Finance Authority when we receive our funding as we receive the capital. So this is what I am requesting, and that is to seek out at least $60,000 worth of a commercial loan or commercial line of credit. Unfortunately, I don't know if we're going to be able to get it under BMO or not. David?
If I can add to that. So essentially, right now, we have, what, I guess we just made payroll, so we're about, what, 150,000 with our savings in the bank. Typically, it's close to, we get to about 150 to 200,000 end of every month. So we're doing financially better than we have in the past. The problem is that we have capital projects that we're paying for. And so the state of New Mexico informed us recently that they want us to pay everything in advance. So in the last 8 years, our major contractor has been Creative Bus, which is now Mobile One. Mobile One is an approved contractor for the state of New Mexico. They actually won the contract year after, well, every 3 or 4 years, they bid, and we get a couple of bidders. They were awarded the contract for mid-size and larger buses, and then a separate contractor, BYD, which is a Chinese firm, was awarded for the big buses to do electric buses. But then that has its own problems given by America and so on. We're not going to talk about that here today, but so the bottom line is it's a contractor the state has. So the state has been paying the 80% of the capital to the contractor, with us having to pay the 20% match that goes with that. We submit all those documents through, they get paid, and we actually submit a check for the 20%, and we're done. Now we're being told, and this has been the policy for several months now, that the state will no longer be paying those 80% anymore, and we'll have to do it. Now, for buses that are maybe $200,000 a piece, that has its own challenges for us. And we're going to get into this in the next presentation on the budget, but you know, we have a lot of money outstanding from the FTA, and I'll let Adam perhaps pick up that ball. But this is what we're trying to look at today, is how do we catch up and leverage, and that's what we've used the 60,000 before, is to leverage the payments of the capital, and then we pay it off at the end of the year. That would be our request to do that.
Yeah,
If I
but,
could I was going to clarify one thing, is that DOT will not pay their 80% until we have proven that we have paid our 20%. So we have to pay first, and then they are able to pay it. Now, again, just as David indicated, is that they have changed matters that we have to pay the vendor completely, the whole 100%, and then request the 80% reimbursement from the state.
okay. Well, it just sounds like, you know, they're changing everything right in the middle of the road. I mean, just whatever the expression is, but they're changing things. It seems like the practice, or is it a statute or whatever?
It's really
Just
a
a practice.
It's a practice, yes.
That it's just a practice. They should do it forthwith, you know, forward, not, I mean, it's like penalizing the understanding that entities have had. And it's really, I think it just doesn't sound legal. It doesn't sound, it's certainly not fair. But it just
Especially when
doesn't
you're
sound-
running as tight a budget as we are.
Yeah, and we're doing relatively well compared to other municipality, I mean, other entities in the state, right?
Right. Can you
And so
explain-
why, it's like punishing, you know, you're in the middle of a trip, and all of a sudden they decide to stop the train. And they're not honoring the agreement that was held. I mean, I don't understand that. I don't understand that part at all.
And that's one part, but I want him to explain the other part, which is the federal. So the FTA owes us how much money in the 2 grant applications we're trying to get processed?
$1 million. It's
How much?
around $1 million. We have $329,000 for fiscal year '22 that I'm still expecting, and again, we had submitted that, and over $700,000 for fiscal year '23 expenditures.
Do we, do our senators have any say-so, or would they be able to kind of, you know, I want to use a football term, but I'm really whatever, but just sort of interlope, or just, is there any, would they have any?
I know that David has approached our senators before, especially when we had difficulty with the first half of the fiscal year '22 submission.
Did they help?
They did, I believe, help. And the problem is that when we submit something, it takes months for this whole thing to get through the system and approval so that we can actually draw upon those funds. Now, we had put through, and last March, we put through for the first half of fiscal year 22 expenditures. We did not get that until September of 23.
Wow.
Right. Now, I was assured when I put in the second half of the fiscal year 22 that it was only going to be a few weeks because we had already put through the first half. Then I found out after the fact that no, that's not the case. It may take months.
Somehow it just sounds, it just doesn't seem,
Fair?
well, it's not fair for sure, but,
That's the
but
word.
it just, why are they changing the rules right in the middle of the game? Something that has already been agreed upon. If it was, here forward or whatever, from here forward, but for an existing agreement, they've just changed the rules in the middle of the road, in the middle of the game.
And it seems to be, it's like FTA as well as NMDOT. So I don't know if it's just the agents or the transit industry across the board, or perhaps it's budget reasons that they haven't decided up in
why are they-
Washington. I just do
but-
not know.
Why are they backing out of that? That just doesn't sound kosher to me, to be backing out right in the middle, right? We already have an agreement. I mean, what,
I wish I had an answer for you.
yeah.
The
well,
agreements are not very timely, and especially unusual in an election year that the administration is not be able to push the money out for local projects. What I can advise us to do, and I apologize to my chair, but the last time I drafted a letter for you to them, they didn't respond. However, when I sent that letter off last summer, the senators responded on your behalf. So we could do that again and work our way through that. And that's about the only thing I can think of. Because at this point in time, we're basically being told, well, it's in the system and, we've got to do local, then we'll go do legal and whatever. What I found it most unusual that the grant that we took so long to go through fiscal year '02, when we say fiscal year '02, we should not lose track of that. We're talking October 1st of 2022 through, or actually 2021, you're right. See, even I'm losing that now. To September 2022, the grant that hasn't been touched yet, that we're trying to get funds, 03, is from October 2022 through September 2023. The grant year we're in now, which is now approaching that midway point, is a grant that you're going to be hearing about this week. I just heard it this morning. So there are no transportation grants approved by the U.S. government through Congress for this fiscal year. So they've had continuing resolutions, but people tend to confuse the continuing resolutions. And those continuing resolutions are paying for the staff of the U.S. Department of Transportation. They are not paying for projects. Well, the staff is a small portion of the grant of the whole thing, and it's like maybe 2%, 3%, whatever. So that means none of those funds are moving. Now, what that also means is let's hope for a miracle and this weekend that they approve the U.S. Transportation Grant. Those funds don't move until Congress, through the Federal Register, reports it. That takes the staff of the US DOT time to do that. It's typically about 30 days. That would be sometime in March, maybe for the end of March. Then those grants, which we've learned in the past, we now have to take those to the El Paso MPO for programming through the State Transportation Improvement Plan for the state. They only do that quarterly. And so the next opportunity is March, which means we're going to miss that. That means we then go to June. I will produce the reports. We'll have Tim help me with that and so on and so forth. That gets programmed. And then that should go through pretty quickly. Then at that point in time, we open up the grant online for July 2024 for last year. So we can start the application process that has to go through all the internals and everything else. I would hope that by the time we do that, that the other two grants will have been approved.
So if you do all of that, these are all contingencies, but if you do take all the steps, and then you'll be ahead of the game.
Oh, we'll be way ahead of the game because we anticipating, what was it, about 800,000 for just the 24?
Yes, 811. That isn't included the million he's talking about.
Right.
Yeah. And where that really makes a difference, I'm glad Commissioner Sanchez is with us. Welcome. We get an MOA from the county every year, and I did send information to the staff yesterday that after today's meeting on the budget, we'll have some information. I can send it to them by next week. When we don't get funded by these urban grants in which we program funds for the 5307 for maintenance, operations, fuel, and so on in our fiscal year, when that doesn't happen, then we tap into the county funds, and then that money goes in on credit until we get paid. So we're actually looking for about 300,000 plus in operating funds from last year. Last year's already over. So we utilized the county grant. If it wasn't for that, we'd be building money out of the county funds either to reduce what we ask for each year, or we would end up having that money in our capital program like we do with the legislature and so on, because we get 2 years on that to spend that down. So it's becoming fascinating. I understood the first go around in 2002, we're new, trying to get this thing through, that'd be problematic. Then there was COVID, and then there was the shutdown and all those things we had, or the year-end closure back in October. But now we have all these things that we're having to deal with, so, yeah. So honestly, a $60,000 BMO loan is really not that significant for us. But we have smaller grants of $27,000 for this project, $10,000, so on. And what we want to be able to do, and that's what we've done in the past, is we use the credit money to pay those things down, move the money over, get reimbursed from the state, and then process that out. And at the end of the fiscal year, we pay off the grant, the loan. So it's not a lot of money for us, but it allows us to keep that $150,000 to $200,000 that we have in the bank each month, so that we're not in the red.
So I'm thinking in terms of, well, the question to you, David, Mr. Armijo, is it seems like there's a lot of, have you compared the allocations by the FTA? Compare the allocations made to larger municipalities and urban, non-urban areas? I'm sure that there's a difference in the funding. And is there any way of monitoring that or seeing whether they're just picking on the little guys who they know are, I mean, I think we're a very well-functioning county and a very well-functioning third largest city in New Mexico. But, and that's kind of scary, because if they're treating us this way and then they're not funding the rural areas, I mean, who's getting the money? And why is it, I'm almost looking at it as a discriminatory action.
I'm not so sure it's that. What it is the larger agencies are able to go to and request monies from a loan or what have you, and have positive turnaround to be able to pay those off. Okay. They are able to see those agencies at the amount that they want to get, and they're more than happy to supply $10 million to that particular agency to purchase whatever buses that they want. They establish the line of credit, and then they are able to use it and draw down upon it and then pay it back, so forth. With us, we play things very close to the breast. We have only so much for operating. The remainder goes to capital. So we have to keep a more positive in ours than they really do in theirs. There's also that, and their personnel, much of their personnel are contracted out. Okay, so their expenditures are only limited in certain ways. All our personnel are employed by the district.
But do you see a discrepancy between the allocations to other entities?
The allocation perhaps, but the timing,
Well, that's
Maybe they're
probably-
more familiar with how the processes work. I don't know. I can tell you, since I started in 2020, we were only receiving funding from the New Mexico DOT. Since I've been here, now we are receiving funds from the Department of Finance and Administration, from Finance or Federal Transit Authority, several different agencies we are now receiving
Oh, okay.
funding from. So we have to get established, so to speak. Now, what I am surprised about is, just like David mentioned, is that fiscal year '22 has been submitted. They have all the paperwork, they have everything on file. The only thing that we did not do was put through for the entire $696,000 at the time.
Wow. And what's the status, what's going on with Bank of the West? I know, didn't it change names?
Bank of the
and
West
then
is
they
now
did a whole-
BMO. BMO is a Canadian company, and they, see, that's the thing. We requested from them to see about reestablishing this line of credit that we had, the $60,000. We paid it off, so forth, and all. They came back to me saying, okay, now that we're under a different bank, we have to put through the paperwork all over again. Now, I do not know what paperwork was required when we first got the line of credit several years ago and all, but apparently we were able to provide what was necessary for the Bank of the West. For BMO, I'm still researching to determine that.
Is it because they're a Canadian bank or what?
I just don't know.
Are there international rules or something on banking or what? I mean,
I think the issue is that they consider us as if we're a private sector, because they
Right.
keep asking for tax and things like that you wouldn't do for a government agency. We've talked about possibly looking at Wells Fargo. We may have to look at a different bank. This may not be possible to work with them.
doesn't
I know the
sound
Bank of America would be an option. I wouldn't want to go there. They're kind of expensive, but Bank of America was our bank when I was with the AC Transit up in the Bay Area. I actually canceled that contract because we had to pay for that. But we were able to get our financials turned around so quickly in the first 2 years I was there that we had so many millions of dollars in the bank, we didn't need to worry about that. Plus, we had sales tax. So it was really a cash flow issue that caused that problem, and we fixed that. Our cash flow here is different because we're dealing with these transit systems or these state governments and federal governments in which when they look at some look like Roadrunner's bank is backed by the city of Las Cruces. You've got plenty of money. They look at El Paso Metro system there, and Sun Metro, they're backed by the city of El Paso. So they're not really concerned about those things. I know when I was with the city of Santa Fe, we were buying buses and it was several $1 million. And I thought, okay, the city of Santa Fe can handle that. It was a municipality. No, it was $2.5 million. Where are we going to get the money? So all of a sudden, it depends. And that was 25 years ago, so maybe a different time. But $2.5 million can be a bit of money to pay a vendor and then get reimbursed by the feds. So, but we worked it out. We actually got a check sent to the city, 72 hours. So it can be done, but the times have changed. I don't know. It seems that we have a lot more bureaucracy. I've had this conversation with the Senate's Heinrich staff. It doesn't seem like anybody's really dealing with the administration. And I don't want to just blame the Biden administration, but this is their people. And it's been an ongoing problem for over a year.
oh, wow. Thank you, gentlemen.
At this moment, I would entertain a motion to approve item number 7.
So moved by Flores.
I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second by Hernandez.
Motion has been seconded by Amir Hernandez. I did want to mention, so is this, you're looking at this for operating, or is this for the?
Capital. Just capital.
Because the NMFA, we use NMFA for, I think, electric, emergency vehicles.
Right.
So I think that might, and I think they issue at 0% or 0.1% or something like that.
The one thing that, yes, sir, the one thing I've been able to determine is that the interest rates are far better
Yeah.
with the New Mexico Finance. Now, they have several different programs, so that's
Yeah,
another
'cause I know
thing I'm
those-
trying to,
I think the one at 0%, you have to pay $2,500 or something for the processing or whatever. But I mean, it's, something to look at. I think when these components come to play and if it's going to be reimbursed.
I'm having a meeting tomorrow with your city managers.
Okay.
So maybe I can talk to Sunland Park and see if they can help us out with that, because I agree, that seems to make the most sense. We need to find something else. I think this is just a short-run request. If we do this at all, this is something we'd only do for 120 days. We'd wrap this up in June, or we don't do it at all.
Yeah, I'm fine with it, but that is, I mean, we as the city do use NMFA, so just, it's a resource that I think we could tap into. All right, any further questions? Seeing and hearing none, let me have a roll call vote on the matter, please.
Javier Perea,
Yes.
Russell Hernandez,
Yes.
Kathy Lullenborg,
Yes.
thank you. Yvonne Flores,
Yes.
Manuel Sanchez,
Yes.
Diana Murillo.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Motion carries unanimously. For the record, Commissioner Sanchez is present and Mayor Murillo is present as well. Jumping on to the next item is a workshop for the FY 2025 annual budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the presentation of the fiscal year 2025 budget for South Central Regional Transit District. This first page is, draw your attention to, is the personnel breakdown for, as we anticipate starting off fiscal year 25 with. It's an increase of 2.33% or $33,632.12 over the current budget due to a full year of the current employee bid, which started this month, which went into effect this month, and it was for Sunday service for our southern routes. It also takes into account a full year of the special projects planner position, as well as adding a mechanic position and a driver position. The breakdown in personnel amounts to about 51.4% northern routes and 48.6% southern routes. Are there any questions on this? Now, as I said, it was a 2.33% increase of the current employee routes or the employee bid. And I have taken into account a 3.5% COLA adding into this particular expenditure, which would bring the expenditure up to $1,521,329.69, or a total of 5.36% over the current budget year. Expenditures. The employee benefits, I anticipate a decrease of about 4.66% over the current year due to the adjustment at the end of the fiscal year 2023 that is not included in the current year. Travel and maintenance, this is 4.76% increase. Travel, fuel, and maintenance, it's a pretty conservative estimate, but it is an increase just to be able to cover our bases. Supplies, 9.08% increase over the current year, and it is hoped that we will acquire the Sunland Park facility before the end of the fiscal year, and so we will be required to supply that particular facility. Insurance. This amount is a carryover from the current fiscal year, only because I have yet to receive the amounts that they're proposing for the next fiscal year. I have already been in communication with them, and they had indicated that they will provide that information within a few weeks. So this probably will change. Contractual services, 8.43% increase, is also a conservative estimate, as software usage and other services will probably increase. Operating costs, a decrease of 29.35%. In general, the costs show an increase, with the exception that I am not showing a carryover or a loan, commercial loan payback for the fiscal year 2025. Total expenditures I show as a decrease of 6.4%. Are there any questions so far?
So on the employee benefits, we're not anticipating any increases in the health insurance?
The health, okay, at the
We've
end of
already
the,
done it.
yes, at the end of the last fiscal year,
Yeah.
they billed us an additional almost $40,000.
Yeah.
And which carried over and was paid actually in the new fiscal year.
Okay.
That's why it's in this year. And I do not show it going into, as far as next year. I am showing actual costs based on the expenditure for January.
Okay.
Any other questions regarding expenditures?
So I want to bring up something. So we won't know until after March, when we come back in April for the third quarter. I believe the number to look at is the current budget year. I believe we will be coming in under those expenditures. I think most of what we got hit was at the beginning of the budget year from the previous year carryover. So that's part of the problem year over year. But what I wanted the board to think about or focus on is our goal is to keep those numbers low, which is why we're seeing the numbers lower for next year than this year, because it's already assumed the increases. The other aspect to look at will be what we have difficulty controlling, and just for our newest board member, we have two critical parts of the budget. The 5311 New Mexico DOT funds that we get for our bus services, which is just over $1 million grant with bus and capital. We do not get our grant award from the state until about the first week of June. So we're estimating all the way through. We typically do a budget approval in May, June. I think last year we even did May because we knew we were going to have to come back. We revised that in July. So this is an early guess estimate. We should have a better idea. Now, each year for the last 2 years, we've been leading the state, and as a result, we've been getting extra funds. They actually gave us an extra $80,000, I believe, this year that's programmed in the budget. So we've actually been able to add or keep our services growing because of the fact we keep getting more money from the state because of our performance, which is good. We don't know that we can count on that, 3 years in a row, but I think the chances are pretty good that we will. So we think that the monies that we programmed are pretty conservative. That means the fiscal year 2025 could actually come in higher. I've adjusted the county funds, I'll say this quickly before Commissioner Sanchez comes back, by the same amount of the current year plus a 5%, which assumes a 3.5% for labor, but it also assumes some additional costs for fuel and other things. However, we're also tracking below on fuel. It's become such a gamble. I feel like we're going to Vegas. I don't know what to expect on fuel. So we tend to keep it a little higher. So my point is the county monies could vary, but what we've assumed is higher than what we would normally need. So we've minimized our risk on the county side, and we've also minimized our risk on the state side, but we think there'll be benefits coming back to us. Otherwise, everything else in here is pretty much online with where we think we're going to be, based on our experience, and based on the fact we paid extra last year for the health care. So I think that I just wanted to lay that out. So my point is, it's still early, it's February. We got another 4 months at this. We might see some changes as we go. Our hope would be that the capital projects or the expenditures for this year actually come in under, and that there's some savings there.
Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding expenditures? Okay, going over to revenue. I show basically a decrease of about $54,196.16, or a decrease of 1.9% over the current budget. Again, what you will see here is much of the numbers are estimated, and some of that is carryover from the current fiscal year to the next fiscal year, because July through September is the end of the budget year for the Mexico DOT. So those 3 months will actually carry over into the new fiscal year. Those amounts I can actually estimate pretty spot on, but we don't anticipate an increase in the membership dues. We have yet to receive all the operating revenue to date because, so we don't know how we're going to stand on 5310. Hopefully, we will be able to carry over and have that as well. I do show, again, carry over about 3 months worth of the 54,000 that I'm showing there. Again, I'm showing a total of $2,759,397.61 gross operating revenue. That puts us to the good of about $94,080.66 from, minus the expenditures, of course. Any questions regarding revenue? Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, I don't spend enough time with Adam, so I catch up with him here, so I apologize. A week ago Friday, I had Dave Harris, who's the Senior Director for the New Mexico Department of Public Transportation for the state, and so he happened to be visiting Las Cruces with his daughter, and I think she was doing some kind of sports or something or other. Anyway, he came by and we spent about an hour and a half together. It was a good conversation on a number of fronts, but most importantly, on the 5310, he did encourage us to make another request for the coming year. So we will do that. Waiting for certain people to come back from New Mexico on their vacation. So if we get those funds rolled over, not just the rollover part, we'll have that, but if we're able to reprogram again, that would help. And the reason for that would be, we discussed that, and I know we have a person on the phone call for Sierra County, because we are intending to do service to start up in May in Sierra County. And so this would carry that project through the next fiscal year to have those services operating. So we definitely would want to try to do something with that.
Any other questions regarding revenue? Okay, finally, capital. As you can see, we are showing an increase in capital projects by about 132.2%. This is due to a great deal of carryover of our current capital to the next fiscal year budget. A great deal of this is due to and dependent upon our purchase of the Sunland Park facility. What we have here is we have buses, we have administrative vehicles, we have APCs, that's automatic passenger counters, solar canopies. There is just a great deal of fixed assets or capital that we are anticipating being able to employ, especially in the Sunland Park facility. And a good portion of that, as you'll notice along the left side, has to do with buses, replacement buses or expansion of services. In the end, it amounts to about capital increase to about $4,487,875.56, or 132.2%. And then the local funds, we anticipate an increase of about $270,720, or increase of about 54.1%. The following pages are what I have been able to verify that we have in our set of grants that we have been awarded. And there's the DFA funding, the New Mexico DOT funding, as well as the FTA funding. And as you can see, there is questionable as far as what items are actually going to carry over, and it depends on what fixed assets we are actually going to be able to secure within the fiscal year 25 versus the fiscal year 24 and forward, or fiscal year 24 and 25 and forward. Are there any questions? This is just a presentation of how I anticipate our budget going for the next fiscal year.
Thank you.
Just a quick question on my end is, have we looked at what our capacity is for grants? And like, keeping with the county's 750 and then the membership fees. Because, I mean, it's a delicate balance, but I mean, what's our capacity there?
So we're getting close. Clearly, it's getting tough. Part of the difficulty in answering that question is that the numbers keep moving. I mean, part of the budget process of what Adam was sharing is the numbers that move. For example, I laid that out, and I'm going to go into that in my next presentation on capital, but I'll just say simply put that the buses that are now expected to be delivered, the first 2 electric buses that we ordered over a year ago, were delayed about 5 to 6 months to what would have been this coming spring, actually, originally, to this coming fall, October. Now they got delayed again 2 more months to December, and then the 3 in February, which are the CMAQ money from El Paso, are now delayed into April. And so I have to assume those delays may still be moved again. Why? Because battery vehicles are becoming problematic, in part because of Buy America, and there's very few companies that can do it. So many companies now, like Proterra, we talked about before, that was being bought up around the country. That company is now out of business, filed for bankruptcy, and there was issues there. BYD, which is a Chinese, which Las Cruces is doing. Las Cruces is only able to get those buses because they have a waiver for when they bought the buses or ordered them. So they'll still be able to get them, but they have their own problems with equipment and so on. So on one hand, this has been good for us, to answer your question, because it's given us more time to get money. We have a request in the legislature for over $500,000. I'm not sure how much of that we'll get this coming year. We asked for that last year. We got 300,000, 200,000 the year before. So we still have money to draw down on those 2 years. That's part of the matrix. So we are actually working on a more definitive plan that shows the multiple years of the contract. I'm going to bring that back to the board, but I'm going to go into the presentation here in a minute. It covers some of that. So I think what you're looking for is, are we at 50% or are we at 95%? I think we're somewhere between 50 and 95%. I would say probably in 70 percentile. And I think what saved us has been either the legislature, the county, or the fact that the business keeps pushing the numbers back. However, those grants that we're getting on the 5339 and the CMAQ are good for up to 6 years. So at any given year, we can push back a bus order or whatnot if we don't have the funds. So I think that's the saving grace. Our priority goes to operating.
Okay. Just food for thought.
Oh, I know where we need to go with this discussion, but I'll leave that out. It's not on the agenda.
Any other questions on item number 8?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Adam.
All right,
So item number 9, capital projects and grants discussion.
I'll go up there. I think we have slides. All right. Anybody feel like taking the steps? It's like going back to school. For the record, David Armijo, Executive Director. I'm going to make a short presentation, kind of lay out a little bit of the last discussion we just had of cash flow, capital projects, grants. How do we manage those two things? I'm going to cover in this overview, I'm going to talk about transit funding, who our partners are, the evolution of the grants, what we're facing today compared to what we had in the past, federal grants, formulas, grant tables, and financial challenges. And the grant evolution is myself. I started my career working for the regional government in San Diego. I was a federal grant review assistant back in the day when this gentleman by the name of Ronald Reagan became president. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but I was doing the grants. And the thought process was all the grants are going to go away, the world was changing, and so on and so forth. That did not happen. In fact, everything has actually gotten bigger. So what I want to show here, and I think this is important, we kind of glossed over, and forgive us because we got into numbers, and we still have 4 more months to deal with the budget. But here's what's in the assumptions of those budget numbers that Adam just presented. So really, you're looking at 2 things, operations and capital. So with operations, that's really the people. So you have the labor and staff, fuel, maintenance, administrative, and technology all kind of go together. We're going to be talking lots more about technology in the coming year. some of the things we're looking to do that's going to improve the quality of service for our customers, both in passenger amenities, but also in how we track the buses, how we learn from managing our fuel sources. We are already looking at doing that kind of thing. When we hook up on those electric vehicles, we're going to be able to manage exactly whether we're getting the best fuel price by the time of day, because it does vary between peak and off-peak and so on. So there's going to be another round of work to do, which is one of the reasons why we hired a planner. Now, is Tim still on the phone? Tim? Can he hear us? Can he speak? He might be working on my project. Tim, can you hear us? So I'm going to introduce him. Hopefully he'll come on. So Tim McDaniel just joined us in the last 3 weeks, excuse me. And he is a special projects planner, is that right? We had to come up with a name, so, because we didn't want to
I'm
duplicate.
sorry.
We stole it from Sunland Park. Welcome, Tim. Sorry it took you to this point for me to introduce you.
No, you're okay. Can you hear me now?
There you go. He's calling all the way from Odessa, Texas. So he's a foreigner in a strange land.
No, I'm out visiting with family right now.
There you go. You can see him. So
yeah,
Tim,
sorry about that.
just give us a quick elevator speech. You're from Odessa, correct?
Yes. So I'm from Odessa. I'm out visiting, like I said, my sister's birthday is tomorrow, and since she only gets one every 4 years, we try to make it a little special. So I had this trip planned before I came on. But so I'm coming to you from my mom's living room. I'm surrounded by her animals. The quick story, I started as a planner with the city of Odessa after I got my master's degree in public administration. My husband started his PhD at UTEP, so we moved out to El Paso, and I've been with the MPO and Sunland Park most recently, and now I'm here. So.
Well, thank you so much. I know he's going to be too gracious to say it, but Tim brings a wealth of knowledge on the areas that we have weakness, like GIS planning, mapping, and information technology. He and I have spent the last 3 days together extensively doing a lot of the research. I gave him a whole bunch of stuff to work on until I'm out of here today on our cost-benefit analysis of this grant project. His ability to get in there, do the mapping and stuff is really helpful. He's working, actually, we got him rolling with, I think we had, 15 items for him to work on the first week. So we've got him introduced to staff. He's been out riding buses. He actually has already been to Hatch. He and some of the other staff were riding the buses out there. He's seen the routes all the way through Chaparral and to downtown El Paso via the yellow route out of Sunland Park. He has an office in Sunland Park, so he's actually at the facility right now. And when he's in the office, he's there. So he brings a wealth of knowledge to us, and we're looking forward to having him, and that's going to allow us to move forward. So thank you so much, Tim. We're done with you. You go back to work. Unless there's
Thanks,
any
sir.
questions of Tim. All right, so definitely in the first line is labor and staff. That's where Tim is. We move down to things, uses of funding in our combined agency budget. So you see capital, and then you have the vehicles, the facilities, equipment, technology, and infrastructure. So technology, you can tell, pops up in both areas, whether it's operations or it's capital for that. So remember that for later. We'll come back to this slide. Our grant partners, we've talked a little bit about that today, the federal, state, and local. You can see the little loops, how they all interconnect between what's federal, what's non-federal. And this can include everything from the revenue that comes from fares. It could be advertising, real estate. It can be contracted services, any one of a number of sources. The grants tend to be spread out. Now, the one thing I'll leave you with the grants, which is new for me in all my 4 decades of working, only place I've ever worked for in 4 different states is New Mexico, where under the 5311, so it's interesting, the poorest people, the rural operators, get 365 days to use and spend the money, and it's gone. His number one priority is spend the money. You've been in the 100% the last 2 years, right? Pretty much. I think you were like 99 something the first year. So Adam's done better than most. I actually find it horrendous that the average is about 92% or less gets spent. So the rest of it just goes to the state and goes over to the governor's office or wherever they want to spend the money. So I will say this, in our 8 years, we have spent no less than 99. So we've done a good job of spending it through this process. I can't even imagine ever giving up any money. So that's a big part of it. The state does that for their own reasons, its own business practice. Most states, it rolls over and you have several years under the grants to spend it. Our program partners, in fact, we just kind of recently added DFA into this whole process. We kind of realized that the money, we keep calling it the state legislature and we get the funds from our local reps, but the reality, it's the Department of Finance and Administration. So this is another group that Adam works with. And something that wasn't happening until we took over our finances a few years ago, we were not in the first 3 years of this agency, at least since I was here in the first 3 years, our contractor never submitted a report to DFA. We never gave them a quarterly report or an annual report. So we started giving them reports, and guess what? They weren't happy with the reports, and so they gave us their own form, right? So we've done very well with them. I think you got an award here not long ago from DFA last year. So we've made up for past practices, but they're a major part of it. Of course, the SCRTD board members were our membership fees, the county MOA, and Sunland Park on DMV fees. So that's the track that we take. The grant evolution, I won't go through all this. I actually predated myself earlier by saying I go back to 1981. It was before all these grants. When I go, all that will be lost because most people don't understand that before 1981, actually 82, the grants were categorical. As a categorical grant, that means you get the money for your region based on your population and based on the services you use. So we started getting money in 2017 from the federal government for this agency. This agency has been in existence since 2003. We had 14 years we didn't get any money. We didn't ask for it. Now, I broke Wayne Hancock's heart when I told him this. And again, I can say this because I was a federal grant review assistant. I used to fill out the forms in San Diego for all the member cities for that region. And the other thing, we got the money on October 1st. All of it, up front. That's a whole different time in government. So when you listen to the news this weekend, they're talking about closing the government down, all that. The world's changed quite a bit in these years. So 1981, the ICE-T, I won't go through every one of those, but ICE-T was actually a great policy. It came out at that time because what it did is ICE-T actually introduced the Intermodal Surface Transportation System, the opportunity where federal funds, both for highways and transit, could be merged or could be borrowed back and forth. Our first grant in 2019 for the hybrid electric buses came from the El Paso MPO. We were able to qualify for that under the CMAQ, but there was so much difficulty because we didn't exist before all this. And so the state of New Mexico and the state of Texas and the MPO, they all kind of like, well, how are we going to do this with this group? Because they're not a subrecipient, they're not yet a direct recipient. So they decided to take the money and give it to the state, and then the state would pop over their money out of ICE-T and let us have it so we could buy the buses. So it was just a swap of money. We didn't lose anything. However, unbeknownst to me, and this is our first experience with FTA, we didn't have a grant application because they changed the process, and that requires us to start over again. That's why we had a delay back in 2019 into 2020 before we got the funds and the funds. Anyway, so we've had an interesting history at FTA. But those processes have grown over the years, and what has happened is that we've lost track of where the money used to come from, and we've lost track of where you can get your money and who gets the money, who doesn't get the money, or what you qualify for. And so they've become very competitive, and what's ended up happening is most of our money has been taken by the larger citizens, New York, Chicago, the big urbanized areas. And fortunately, we'll give some kudos to the Biden administration. They have begun pushing back on that and moving funds to the rural areas. And they've made commitments in their grants, although still competitive, that they've allowed money to come to the rural areas. So we would have probably not gotten that $3.1 million grant for buses and the facility had the Biden administration not done the Infrastructure Act and had not moved their process through. So it's not all bad within the government. They are doing some good things. They're just very slow. And that process has gotten very, very integrated, and there's so many things that they're asking for us in grants and things like that now. It's kind of amazing. It makes it very difficult for smaller agencies to do what we're doing. And so at this point in time, our agency has actually grown quite a bit. We're now one of the larger agencies in the state. So we've gone from the littlest system back in 2017 to we're kind of up in the top 5 now. Grant programs. So these are the programs that Mr. Shea is having to manage. You see them all up there, Adam? Some of those are listed in such a way that you can get a sense that you have planning and grants. We get most of our funds from the 5311 and now 5339 for capital. And you have to see these numbers and then double them, because he's got the 5311, but he also has a 537 for Mesilla Valley, 537 for the El Paso MPO. He's got the 5310 for the El Paso MPO, 5310 from that. And so we're dealing with lots of different people, lots of different processes to go through that. So we've gotten pretty good at what we're doing. We do very well with our annual reviews. This one splits it up between New Mexico and Texas. So you can see most of our money is coming from New Mexico, but we still have a lot of money coming from Texas. The difference with Texas is the grants are bigger on the CMAQ. That's where the big money is. Those 3 grants is over $5 million right there. In Texas, between the $5 million for the CMAQ, the previous money that we got for the hybrid elections was another $2 million, so that brings that to 7. And now we've gotten 2 years, soon to be 3 years of 5307 urban funds, which now will total up to just about $2 million. So that's like night and day between what we would have had. And that's made the difference between our agency's growth. We would not have been able to step in and do some of the things we've done. And since we've taken over the services from Sun Metro, we've actually been able to expand the services. Now we're providing 7 days a week, and we're doing not just the yellow, but also the silver. And so that route's getting a lot more service. So we would argue that the community has seen an enhanced service since the district took over. The grant formulas, this is always somewhat misleading. So typically, if it's an operating grant, it's going to be 50-50. And if it's a capital, traditionally it's 80-20. However, the CMAQ grants out of El Paso MPO are 85-10. And this was what gets very confused. The 2 grants that we got in recently, the 5339, they're being run through the state of New Mexico and programmed through the FTA through the state of New Mexico. Those are 90-10. Now, I don't know what's going to happen this weekend. I keep coming back to this, because now you're all going to be thinking this weekend about funding. But buried in the grant process, if the funding goes through, one of the things the Biden administration was attempting to do was to have some kind of a scale effort that would allow, especially in the rural areas, to do 100% funding. We had that for about a year during COVID. It made a huge difference for us. So we would love to see that, of course, if we could see in 2024 money out of El Paso MPO. If that 811,000, which is estimated, if that were to come in based on that number, then, and it was 100%, that would be fabulous. And it would make a huge difference to what Adam's trying to do. But that's why we didn't program the funds. We don't know what's coming in there. Grant timelines. I just gave away this first line. So New Mexico gives us 12 months on the 5311, which is about $1 million a year that we get from them. We have only 365 days to get it and spend it. Capital funds can be expended beyond the year as long as we get a purchase order agreement in place and we're ready to go. That's where I look at Sarah, because Sarah's on a timeline to get those things in and get those things done. We had a situation recently, we were still getting things signed. You know, that's always an issue with the state, because they signed the grant applications and stuff. And the company that's taken over for Creative now, Mobile One, we have a new agent for that. So we're actually training him to get his first one through so he gets something signed. He thought I was crazy when I asked him for that, because I understand if we don't have that, we have problems with the funds. We're doing, it's still an education with the El Paso MPO, but we have a pretty good track record with them so far on that timeline. But we're always trying to get the CMAQ money spent within 3 years. I think that's kind of where they try to expand that. So we're in a year or 2 now, so we have a little bit of time to make it. So 2026 would be our cutoff on that one. Financial challenge, I think we've already discussed this earlier before we got to this point. So clearly, tracking the grants from multiple agencies is making it very difficult for Adam. I think having Tim, which you just met, come on board, Tim spent 2 years with the El Paso MPO, so he's familiar with the grants. That's where I first met him. Didn't know him very well, but I did sat in on several of the audits that we did with him. So he understands the grant process better than most. So that's going to be helpful to us. I think he'll be able to, well, nothing else, he has the context right there in the MPO. So he can get some help for us, technical assistance. And I think he can also help Adam as we go through this process and we try to control our tracking of the grants. I think that's going to be helpful to all of us. Again, we've talked about the district pays and so on. So the process is a little more complicated. It should be said that there are very few, if any, agencies in the United States that have the setup where you're getting funded from 2 states. Because nobody else in New Mexico is on the borderline, unless you're up in the Four Corners, you're dealing with Utah or Colorado, you wouldn't have this situation. So it's complicated, not just complicated for us, it's also complicated for the federal New Mexico DOT. The New Mexico DOT has been very helpful to us, and they've been doing a really good job of expediting our expenses. Still a little slower than we'd like to on the capital side, but pretty good on the operating. We just have to tackle the biggest challenge is the FTA up in Fort Worth. We've talked about local match. I think this is a thing that, and to answer the chair's question, I think what we want to do in the coming months before the budget is done is try to provide some kind of a mechanism where we can track the color of the money. And this is what I have, like documents, not updated, but the color of money and timeline for that money so that you can see it all in a spreadsheet as it goes through. So I do have a document that kind of does that. It's a little out of date. It's about a year old. And it's complicated to look through that. But that's what we need to do and have that set up in a better way. The state legislature's funds have been helpful. We've got 2 buses coming in a couple more months that we're going to be using. Those will be the last of the money from 2 years ago. We'll draw the last of the Department of Finance funds for those, and that'll go away. We did have help from our state senator, Adeline, Carrie. She stepped up and got that extended for a year, but I explained thank you for that, but we're going to hope to not need to do that. As I said earlier, as we go through this grant now that's competitive right now, we're dealing with federal folks out of Washington, D.C. We want them, when they pick up the phone and they call to the DFA office, or they call to the folks in Santa Fe or even Fort Worth, we at least want them to be able to say that we're good at getting our money spent and that we meet all the requirements when we do trend reviews, like do we have the proper drug testing policies, have we done all the proper things to hire people and so on, and we maintain our safety operations. So next steps, we have a accountant hired to support the finance. We did that earlier this year. She's still early in her process, less than 6 months. We're reviewing financial programs and procedures to see what other businesses we can take advantage of. We've been looking at peering up a little bit with SCRTD up in the northern part of the state. They've been around a little bit, about 5 or 6 years longer than us. They have a larger service area than we do, but they have a very simple part of it. They split their service into both contract operation and in-house. We really would like to do a cost analysis of them. And the reason I say that is one of the reasons why we got the #1 award last year is that we're the most cost-effective agency in the state for our size and what we're doing. And we're cost-effective because this is it. There's not very many of us. But as any business knows, you can also overextend yourself. I mean, at some point, you have to have the resources you need to do the job. And so we like NCRTD because they're actually a bigger agency, a bigger board. They have their own attorney on contract. We have attorneys on contract, but they actually have an attorney at the meeting. They can afford that. They actually have a clerk of the board. I mean, they almost run like a city government. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I've been to their meetings, and they do a very good job. They're also buying a couple of facilities. Now, the facility that they've got that's being built took them 10 years to raise the funds. It's over $10 million, and it's about the size, actually smaller than the facility we're looking to get for much less than that. But it is the Taj Mahal. It'll have all the bells and whistles. I haven't had a chance to see the city of Las Cruces. They're doing their own maintenance operating facility. I was a little surprised to find out the other day, it's $30 million, Adam. You need to be getting us some money. So, I mean, everything costs what it costs. So that's an issue that we need to look at, but we do want to do what we can to help our financial department and what we're doing. Adding training in-house, we're doing a lot of things with webinars. We're constantly looking at stuff. We're also looking at things we can do to help our employees. You know, I think we're up to 32 people now, something like that. We started with me and then 5 operators. And so, you know, we also have to take a moment and look at the organization and see, do we have what is sustainable for a company? Any questions? Hopefully this gave you some insights into some of the challenges we have.
Any questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner?
I'm just curious, and I know this was a high level on the different challenges and the different funding sources, but do we have any visibility to, and maybe I missed that during the previous agenda item when I had to step out, but just understanding of maybe grants that we're going to be looking at into this coming year, and you know, just looking at other potential sources as we move forward into the next fiscal year.
Yes, I think that's a good question. We can bring to our next board meeting the grant application that's 2025 that's in now that the state's looking to approve. We can make that presentation and show you what's in that and what would come from that, both in services as well as the equipment and so on. And then we can add to that anything else we're looking at doing. And by then we'll have a better idea if we're going to, how much money, if we get money from the legislature. So all those will play into it. What you did miss when we're out is that we still have 4 months until we get to June. So we're going to, you know, this is the first bite at the apple. We anticipate more funds being committed from the federal government that will help us in our programming going forward. And so we think that we'll look at that again. We think that the most important thing right now is look at the third quarter and see how well we can do to get the costs down so that this year's line item is on expenses is more in line with where we're trying to get to for next year. Otherwise, there's a budget gap in there, and we think that that could be problematic. So we want to try to fix that. So there's still a lot of work to do.
And I think one of the, you know, I think is we're starting to learn how to, like you had mentioned, work, learn the system with the El Paso MPO. And, you know, with respect to the mayor here from Sunland Park, as well as Mayor Murillo and Anthony, you know, one of the things that I think is good for the SCRTD is the fact that we really don't have significant competition for CMAQ funding through on the New Mexico side, because that in particular is, you know, one of the things that I did see from the El Paso MPO is that, you know, when they're looking for projects, there's not very many. It's just, you know, unless Doña County, the city of Sunland Park, or city of Anthony, and maybe I'm missing somebody else in there, but really at the end of the day, the SCRTD is perfectly positioned to be able to try to, you know, have that pot of money when we need it and not have as much competition. So I think that's one of the things that I think hopefully we'll be able to pull from more and more as we continue to build the fleet that you have, right, and so on.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think the other thing too I would leave the board with is, while we may slow down at times, when we have been this last year because the buses are delayed and so on, when it's slowing down, it does give you time to look at other things. So we've been looking at passenger amenities, other programs, but we also look at the county from a standpoint, and that will be something I'm going to ask Tim to do now that we have a planner on board, is to make a presentation in the coming months to the board to show what we're doing is fine. What are we not doing? You know, there's nothing up on the East Mesa. There's nothing over there by the airport. I mean, there are a lot of things. I'm having conversations with the city staff from Roadrunner, and there's lots of ideas. We're talking maybe mobility type of solutions with some kind of a Uber type of service. I mean, there's a lot of things we can do. It takes time to do these things. So the first part is have the dialogue and then see what can be done and where that can go. The other thing too is, you know, we can look at the members. I mean, there's lots of resources out there. We don't have to be the only ones doing this. You know, who else is can help in that regard? So, thank you for that.
Any other questions on All right, Dan,
I
thank you.
think we're
That was
done.
thorough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 10, future agenda items, report comments. I just want to mention, I do applaud the work of the staff for being able to tackle the budget this early on, presenting it this early. It's refreshing.
You're welcome.
And also, any update on Sierra County?
Oh, yes, actually, been having fun with the staff this morning on bus stops list. So we have a capital projects, and I'm smiling over at Sarah, because when we interviewed Tim last month before we hired him, one of the projects we gave him is going to be the capital projects that he'll be bringing you to. So we're looking at every bus route. And so we're looking at, okay, where do we think we could put shelters? And we'll come back with a plan for that and program. We've programmed some money in the 2003 money for capital for shelters. So there's that part. And then specifically to Sierra County, yes, we have funds to operate it out of the 5310 that we're going to use from the state. We also have the signs and poles we just got. We're finishing off a separate project on the signs. Once that's done, then we expect to go out in April, first part of May, to install the poles and signs. We've already identified the stops. We'll spend some more time with the local governments before we go out there. That was my commitment to them. So I'll be doing some of that next month. Our anticipation is to roll out in May. We want to get the service actually running before the summer because we know that Elfin Butte gets a lot of business out there. So we think that's a good tie-in. So the service will be done. We've already worked with one of our contractors several months ago, so we've already got a bus schedule ready to go that can be modified, but it's ready to go. The buses would connect to Hatch, and the reason for that is the bus from Hatch would then bring the riders into Cruces and vice versa, but it also send the bus back, so the buses will only be operating really Sierra County across into Doña County, and then that gives them more trips, so they can run more trips with the same equipment, same driver. So it's much less costly to do that, and it would help us to enhance that service. We're hoping that one of these two new buses that's coming, the front runners, they're smaller, but they can do up to 14 passengers with the driver, so 13 passengers. So those would be our early start, because we expect that there won't be a lot of ridership. If that builds up faster than we think, then we have the R-Box, which have 20 passengers or more, and we just slip that into it. And of course, the biggest challenge for us is finding drivers out there, but we'll work on that. We had a Hatch driver before. We can find a way. That's the plan. So yes,
All right.
we're ready to go.
And that's good news, David. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, I wanted to excuse myself. I have another meeting right now, but I did want to mention to David, if he can mention to Tim, I don't know if he's still online, but I guess I heard that his sister's birthday is tomorrow, for February 29th.
Yes.
And the
Yes, ma'am.
town of Anthony, Texas is having the Leap Year Festival for all the birthday babies of February 29th. They're in Anthony, Texas, Saturday and Sunday. Just letting you know. Thank
So-
you.
So in 4 years, she can come over here to Anthony, right?
She can come here, yeah.
Well, to the town, not the city.
Right.
So we don't know what
Town
side
of
to go
Anthony,
on.
Texas is having the Leap Year Festival.
No, fantastic. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate
Okay. Bye-bye.
That's too cool.
it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Any other board comments? All right. Also, there's no item for closed session. So that concludes pretty much all of the business we have for today. I have 3:02 p.m. if there's no objection. We are adjourned. Thank you.